Senator Rick Scott, friend of the program, friend of mine. He joins me this morning talking about a piece he had in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Good morning, Senator. Good to see you last night.
It was always nice. It's nice to see you, and it sounded like I didn't get to stay for the whole event, but it looked like it was going to be a really nice evening. So I hope you had a good time.
I did, but I had to land the plane at 9:30, so I was 30 minutes late. So I was kind of like being the United Airlines MC. But there were 600 people there. I know a lot of people head for the exits at those things, but I must tell you, almost all 6 of them stuck around. But I know you have work to do trying to get the Senate to get serious about spending. Let's get to this Wall Street Journal editorial. Why did you write it? Did you know that the House would be in chaos when you did? Because it's about spending.
Well, here's what I hope happens. I hope out of this, the House figures out how to govern itself where everybody is heard, and we actually figure out how to get towards a balanced budget. That's my goal, right? So what I've been doing all this year, after Kevin McCarthy won his speaker's race, I organized a group of fiscally conservative Republicans, and I invited over and have dinner with them and Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, and some others, and us every week, and say, how do we get something done? I'm a business guy. I want to get something done. I know we have to balance the budget if we're going to get inflation down, if we're going to get interest rates down. That's the only way it's going to happen. So, and look, last Saturday, it was a win. We actually, for the first time since I've been up here, the House and the Senate actually acted in concert to try to figure out how we go forward in a fiscally responsible manner. So I thought that was a big victory. And then now we've got to figure out where the House goes from here. Yeah,
the fiscal hawks were not in favor of knifing Senator McCarthy. Jim Jordan, who's running for his replacement, representing the Freedom Caucus. You have Chip Roy, who's been on the show a lot of times. He's a fiscal hawk. You're a fiscal hawk. There was constructive movement going forward. The most conservative version of their continuing resolution got beat by the Knucklehead Caucus. I mean, what do you say to people? You just can't get there overnight, but you got to get there, and you got to take a first step. And when you take a first step, the knives come out over there.
Well, what I say to everybody is, what's achievable? In my business life, what I said, okay, so what can I get done today? I'm going to get that done. And then tomorrow I'll get something done. And if you do that over a period of time, it takes you a few years, but everybody says, well, man, you were an overnight success. So what we have to do as fiscal conservatives is say, what can we get done today? Now, we're only going to get it done with the House. We're not going to get it done by ourselves in the Senate, so we have to get it done with the House. So my goal is we got to be talking to people. So I worked with Kevin McCarthy to say, what can we do? How can I help you get things done? That was, my experience in life is that, and it's the opposite of what I've heard. My experience up here is if I help people, there's a greater chance the stuff I believe in is going to get done. And so that's what I try to do every day.
Now, that is a different planet up there, meaning on Capitol Hill. It's just like going to the Planet Congress when I come in to see someone. Now, Senator Scott, I want people to be reminded of what I had forgotten. When you were in the private sector, you started in public housing. Your mom was not rich. You rose up. You took over a giant company. You became the governor for 8 years. Then you became the senator for 8 years or longer. I'm not sure how long you've been the senator now. What were you doing in the private sector? Because when you told me last night that you had at one point 100,000 doctors working for you, my head almost exploded because I can't imagine working. And I love doctors to take care of me, but I can't imagine work. That's like working with the Freedom Caucus, the rump of the Freedom Caucus, the Knucklehead Caucus.
My experience with doctors, they love taking care of you. So I built a company started from scratch, and we had 343 hospitals, 135 surgery centers, about 700 healthcare association, home healthcare, and we were in 37 states, a couple foreign countries, and we took care of about 150,000 patients a day. And so it was a great experience because every day you woke up and you did something positive for somebody. So I had about 285,000 employees. And then after that, I built a variety of manufacturing companies. If you own a Corvette, I made your outer body. So hopefully, if you have a Corvette, you like the outer body of your car because I made that for quite a few years. I sold all the companies I bought and fixed up when I became governor. But I loved being in business, what I think about is if I want more jobs in this country, which is what I ran on in 2010 when I ran for governor, you're going to do it because businesses succeed. So my job is how do I get more businesses to grow in this country? Of course, I don't want them in China. I want them in the United States of America and get people to buy American companies or to buy American products.
So, Senator Scott, you did not pass go. You did not have to go to the House and suffer there for a few years before you went to the Senate. You went from the State House to the Senate. I sat last night next to Pete Ricketts, another governor turned senator, and I heard it's quite a change when you go from running things to being one of 100 votes. How did you adjust to that? Because, I mean, you don't get to actually decide anything as one of 100. You got to work as a caucus, and that eludes the knucklehead caucus or the Freedom Caucus.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's really not different. It's not different in business. In business, you might get to make the final decision, but you've got to convince everybody you work with what you're doing. With 285,000 employees, I'm sure most of them thought they were smarter than me. So you have to convince people that the path you're going down is the right path. And so in the same as governor, you've got to convince people. You can be a dictator, and you'll work for a little bit, but that's not generally how you have long-term success. So it's really no different. I've got to figure out, if I want to get my stuff done, I've got to figure out how do I get the House to do it, how do I get 60 people in the Senate to do it, and how do I get a president, to do it? Otherwise, it doesn't get done. But it's really no different than if you're a successful business you've had to figure out the exact same thing. You've got to convince people that your plan is the right plan.
The otherworldly part, and I've been gone for months. I'm just back in D.C. for a week. And the first thing I see in the Wall Street Journal this morning, I'm go looking for your op-ed yesterday, which I recommend to everyone. And I find a story on the front landing page, rising interest rates mean deficits finally matter. And I thought to myself, this headline writer doesn't really know that $33 trillion of debt matters every day because it eats up our federal budget because we've got to make interest payments on that. Do people not get fundamental economics in either body?
They don't. I mean, think about it. Most people are up here, a lot of them have been here since the federal debt was $5 trillion. Now it's $33 trillion.
What?
But,
what?
They don't think about it. I mean, they just don't think about how it happened. Because partially what happened is, interest rates were low for a long time. But I grew up in a family where, I watched my mom deal with inflation. I remember that. But think about it right now. If you bought a $500,000 house the day before Biden took office, and you bought the $500,000 house today, your monthly payment would be up $1,600. Right?
Wow.
If you buy a car, my daughter just bought a car. She said the interest payment is now 8%. So credit cards are highest ever. So it's really impacting people. But your federal budget, it's going to be a massive portion. It's way more than, by the end of this year, probably next year, it'll be more than our defense budget. Just interest expense will be more than our defense budget. And we look at the world's a tough place right now. We've got to invest in defense. But our budget, our revenues are being eaten up by interest expense.
I do not understand how we did not go to long-term debt when interest rates were at 3%. I mean, we're now buying short-term debt at 8%. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I refinanced all the debt I didn't pay off as governor. I paid off a third of the state debt when I was governor, over $10 billion. The rest of it I put into 30-year debt because I got it down, I think it was like 2.7%, and we locked it in forever. So why didn't they do that when interest rates were low? Because if you look at the 10-year Treasury, it's going up. It's every week now. It's just trending up a little bit. Mortgage rates average mortgage now is almost 8%. I mean, it's unbelievable and so we're not going to get a budget under control. We're not going to get interest expenses down. We're not going to get inflation down until we balance our budget. We have to balance our budget.
So why did Chuck Schumer send the Senate home?
I don't know. And why is he going to China? I mean,
Chuck Schumer's going to China?
Yeah. So Chuck Schumer's going to China. There was a lady I talked to. She called me. She said, "No, my kid died of fentanyl, and Chuck Schumer's going over to China to have Peking duck with she." That
I'm kind of stunned by that. I know we have appeasers in the executive branch, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Yellen, Jake Sullivan. They've all been to China. I did not know Chuck Schumer was part of the appeasement caucus. And you're right. Fentanyl is killing 100,000 Americans, and it begins in China. Senator, you got a minute left. What do you want the Senate to do next? Because the House is frozen and may be frozen a long time.
I want to have robust conversations about these spending bills. We only have 10 full day working days until the continuing resolution expires. We've got to get on this. We should not be having recess next week. We should be here all through the weekends until we get all these spending bills done.
Amen to that. Senator Rick Scott of Florida, always a pleasure seeing you and talking to you last night and this morning. Thanks for joining me.